Hello everybody, welcome to Perfusionist Classroom. In this session we are going to discuss about mechanism of myocardial injury during cardiac surgery. So as a perfusionist, this is going to be very much interesting session and also a very much important topic for us, both for our work and exam as well. So the aim of starting this topic is to will gradually progress towards the myocardial protection strategies. First we will know what are the mechanisms that causes injury to myocardium during cardiac surgery, and after that we'll know how to protect myocardium from those injurious factors. So this is our target, or this is going to be our strategy, and thus we will progress in our next sessions. And you all know that under myocardial protection strategies there will be cardioplegia, there will be hypothermia, and a lot of interesting topics and important topics as well. So let's start today's session. So before jumping into the mechanism of injury, we will see some physiology of myocardium, some short questions basically about the physiology of myocardium. This will help us understanding the vulnerability of myocardium towards ischemia and injury, and as well as these are very commonly asked questions in our Viva also. So the first and most commonly asked question is the normal myocardial oxygen demand. That means how much oxygen a normally functional myocardium needs. It is almost 8 ml of oxygen per 100 gram of myocardium for normally active myocardium. Now we all know during open heart surgery we arrest myocardium with potassium rich cardioplegia, commonly potassium rich cardioplegia. So why we arrest myocardium? Basically the aim is to arrest myocardium. So why we arrest the heart or arrest the myocardium? Because there are a lots of causes, but the primary cause is this reduces the oxygen demand. This reduces the oxygen demand and it reduces up to almost 1.1 ml of O2 per 100 gram. This is for potassium arrested myocardium. Obviously this is also enables to perform the operation, it gives surgeon blood free field, etc. But it also reduces the myocardial demand massively, and almost it becomes 1.1 ml of O2 only per 100 gram. And with that we also reduces the temperature of myocardium, that is called hypothermia. And with potassium arrest, the hypothermia again reduces the myocardial oxygen demand to only up to 0.3 ml of O2 per 100 gram. This is hypothermia. This is a hypothermic myocardium. So now you all know what is the oxygen demand, how arrested myocardium, how hypothermia protects the myocardium by reducing its oxygen demand, and how much it reduces the demand of oxygen of myocardium. Again, normal blood flow. Next is normal blood flow of myocardium. It is almost 70 ml per minute per 100 gram of myocardium. That is almost 5% of cardiac output. That is important. This thing is very much important. 5% of cardiac output. 70 ml per minute per 100 gram myocardium. So this is obvious that if the myocardium only needs 5% of cardiac output, then it is obvious that it will be very much sensitive to blood flow to the oxygen supply. So this becomes very much vulnerable to the ischemia. That's why we are so much worried about myocardial ischemia and so much worried about how to protect it without any severe consequences post-operatively. Next, again one common question is when the myocardium gets its blood flow, during systole or during diastole. This is also very common question asked. So basically myocardial blood flow is phasic. Now what does this word phasic means? That means the myocardium gets its maximum amount of blood flow during diastole. Maximum amount. Maximum amount of blood flow during diastole, and during systole it is very much minimum. Now this phasic concept is not so much easy. This is more detailed. I am not going to that detailed part. To be more, in simple words, myocardium gets its maximum blood flow during diastole and very minimum during systole. Why? Because during systole, myocardium is contracted. That is, the muscle of cardiac wall is contracted. So what will happen? The blood. The coronary arteries and the arterioles that are passing through the myocardium, that are supplying the myocardium, that is embedded inside the myocardium with contraction of myocardium. If this is the myocardium and this is the blood vessel, if this is contracted, then this thing, that is the blood vessel inside the myocardium, will also be contracted. So the blood flow will not occur through the blood vessels. That is why during systole the blood flow is minimum, and during diastole when the muscles are relaxed, so the vessels inside the muscle, the vessels embedded inside the muscle, they are not compressed. So the blood flow can occur. So that is the concept of myocardial phasic blood flow. This is the diagram of myocardial phasic blood flow. This is the systole. This part is the systole of cardiac cycle and this part is the diastole of cardiac cycle. Now x-axis, this is x-axis, this is y-axis. This y-axis denotes the phases of cardiac cycle and x-axis denotes the coronary blood flow in ml per minute. So you can see during systole this is lower, and not only lower, this is very much minimum, and during diastole the coronary blood flow has gone upward, and again there will be systole, and with that the blood flow will again go downward. That means the blood flow again will be decreased. So this is the phasic form of or phasic pattern of myocardial blood flow. So, and some other questions are autoregulatory threshold of myocardium. So autoregulatory threshold of myocardium is 60 to 180 millimeter of myocardium. Next is the factors on whom the myocardial blood flow is on whom the myocardial oxygen delivery is dependent. First is obviously hemoglobin, because hemoglobin carries the oxygen so obviously if the level of hemoglobin is lower, then the amount of oxygen that will be carried through the blood to the myocardium will be low. Next is the blood flow to the myocardium, which is controlled by autoregulation, and I have already mentioned the autoregulatory threshold, that is 60 to 180 millimeter of mercury. Next is arterial oxygen saturation, and next other factors are transmural gradient. Now what is transmural gradient? This is difference between the aortic diastolic pressure and intraventricular end diastolic pressure. Next, oxygen delivery can also be affected by perfusion pressure or perfusion pressure is systemic. So other factors on which myocardial blood flow or oxygen supply is dependent is transmural gradient, which is the difference between the aortic diastolic pressure and the intraventricular end diastolic pressure. Next, myocardial oxygen demand again can be decreased due to by some obstruction in coronary artery, that is called coronary arterial disease, or due to systemic hypotension. So in those cases the perfusion pressure will be lower, so the myocardial blood flow will be lower, and all those things mainly affects the LV, that is the left ventricle. Why? Because right ventricle gets its nutritive flow almost throughout the whole cardiac cycle. Now, how can right ventricle get its flow throughout the whole cardiac cycle? Because right ventricular systolic pressure is well below systemic levels, with the exception of instances where there is severe pulmonary arterial hypertension in a patient. So if there is no pulmonary arterial hypertension present, then the right ventricular systolic pressure is well below the systemic pressure. So right ventricle can get its flow all through the cardiac cycle, but left ventricle, which does the main work, which does the most of the work, it gets its blood flow, it gets its nutrition mainly during the diastole, not during the systole. And what if and why we are concerned about getting the blood flow? Because if there is hypoperfusion, then there will be anaerobic condition of anaerobic metabolism will occur, and we all know in normal physiology aerobic metabolism occurs, and from only 1 mole of glucose almost 36 moles of ATP is generated, whereas in anaerobic condition from 1 mole of glucose only 2 moles of adenosine triphosphate, 2 moles of ATP is generated. So there will be obviously deficit of ATP, and and thus the cells of myocardium will be damaged. Now we will see the main mechanisms of myocardial injury. So before starting the mechanism, before detailing the mechanism, some basic concept of mechanism is ischemia. That is, ischemia injures the myocardium. Just like any other organ, ischemia will injure because there will be lack of oxygen supply, lack of nutrient supply to the muscle. So the muscle will be injured. That is for sure. But when we are reperfusing the myocardium, that means when we are restoring the blood flow to the myocardium after the arrest period, when we are restoring the blood flow to the myocardium, what we can expect that when the myocardium will again get the oxygen, get the blood flow, then it should be cured. There should be no more injury to the myocardium. But this is not the fact. Instead of this, the amount of injury that ischemia alone causes, the same amount of injury is caused by reperfusion also. So this is called ischemia reperfusion injury or ischemic reperfusion injury, because here reperfusion also is causing the injury. So we are going to see the components, the different components of ischemia reperfusion injury, how they contribute to injure the myocardium. And in that, first component is depletion of high energy phosphate. First is depletion of high energy phosphate. So obviously during ischemia there will be no blood supply, so the energy stored, that is the ATP, adenosine triphosphate, that is called the high energy phosphate, that will be broken down to extract the energy. Now after ischemia, when we will reperfuse the myocardium, what will happen, that the breakdown product of high energy phosphate will be washed out, and what this will cause, this will prohibit the rapid conversion back to ATP once the perfusion is restored. That means ischemia is breaking down the ATP. Think this is ATP. If ischemia is breaking down, these are the two breakdown products. So when we are reperfusing, these two breakdown products are washed out. If they were not washed out, what will happen after, when the heart again gets its blood flow, gets its oxygen, then the conversion of ATP will be very much easier. The conversion to ATP will be very much rapid. But due to reperfusion, as these products are washed out, so it prohibits the rapid conversion of ATP, and thus both the ischemia and reperfusion causes depletion of high energy phosphate level and causes injury to myocardium. The next point, the next component is intracellular acidosis, and how it occurs. During ischemia, there will be lack of oxygen supply, and obviously there will be anaerobic condition of metabolism, because in lack of oxygen, aerobic respiration of glucose is not possible. There will be anaerobic respiration, and as I have mentioned earlier, that aerobic respiration generates ATP 36 mole per mole of glucose, and anaerobic respiration generates 2 mole of ATP only per mole of glucose. Without this, anaerobic respiration will cause accumulation of hydrogen ions, and this hydrogen ion, accumulation of excessive amount of hydrogen ion, will cause the intracellular acidosis, and that will interfere with the normal function of intracellular enzymes. And when the normal function of intracellular enzymes will be interrupted, then it will cause, obviously, it will cause injury to the myocardium. So the next cause of myocardial injury is intracellular calcium overload. It is one of the chief cause of myocardial injury due to reperfusion. Previously, we have seen that due to ischemia, there is intracellular hydrogen ion accumulation and intracellular acidosis. Now, after intracellular acidosis has occurred, when reperfusion is established, what happens? Myocardial cells try to correct this thing. Now we all know cellular homeostasis is maintained and regulated by various type of ion channels. So when there is intracellular high amount of high concentration of intracellular hydrogen ion and intracellular acidosis, now the aim of the cell is to correct this one. So what it does, the sodium hydrogen exchangers or sodium hydrogen channels are now opened. Sodium hydrogen exchanger. This channel will open and they will push the hydrogen ion out of the cell, and in exchange of hydrogen ion, when hydrogen ion is going out of the cell, in exchange of that, sodium ion will get inside the cell. It will push hydrogen ion outside the cell. It will push hydrogen ion outside the cell. Hydrogen ion outside, and in exchange of one efflux of hydrogen ion, there will be one influx of sodium ion. Now again, there will be a high amount of sodium ion inside the cell. There will be a high concentration of sodium ion, and that will gradually activate sodium calcium exchangers. Now what it will do? It will push the sodium outside. That means there will be influx of sodium ion outside the cell, and in exchange of sodium ion efflux, there will be influx of calcium ion, and thus there will be high concentration of calcium ion inside the cell, and it will cause calcium overload. Now we all know that calcium is a very important ion for cellular contraction and relaxation, but when the concentration of calcium ion is high inside the cell, then it will be very much harmful. There will be problems in contraction and relaxation, and other activity of enzymes will be prohibited by extra calcium ion concentration. Thus, overload of intracellular calcium ion will cause myocardial injury, and it is the most prominent cause of injury due to reperfusion. Next mechanism is oxygen derived free radicals. These are highly unstable compound and causes injury to cellular proteins, cell membranes. It also damages nucleic acids, phospholipids and other cellular components. And natural free radical scavengers prevent damage under normal circumstances, but these endogenous systems are depleted during ischemia, and thus the scavengers, free radical scavengers, the activity of natural free radical scavengers are suppressed, and thus the harmful effects of oxygen derived free radical overwhelms the natural scavenging system. Next mechanism is complement activation. Now, complement activation occurs as a part of generalized inflammation due to ischemia and reperfusion, and due to ischemia and reperfusion, the complement systems are activated with not only the complement system but also there are many more inflammatory components are generated, like prostaglandins, cytokines. These are activated, with that neutrophils are also activated. Now in inflammation chapter we have seen that all those inflammatory components causes injury to cell through various ways. So complement activation also injures myocardial cells. And next is adverse endothelial cell and leukocyte interaction. As I said that as a part of ischemia and reperfusion injury, leukocytes are activated in the circulation system. And next is adverse endothelial cell leukocyte interactions. As I already said that due to ischemia and reperfusion, circulating leukocytes are activated. Now, under normal condition, endothelium and neutrophils are the producers and responsive to numerous signaling compounds. And in normal condition, there is a delicate balance between vasoconstriction and vasodilatation. Ischemia reperfusion injury hampers this balance and causes excessive vasoconstriction, and as well as it produces adenosine, nitric oxide, endothelin and thromboxane A2, and these are altered the balance between vasoconstriction and vasodilatation. This may also produce a state of altered endothelial cell and leukocyte interaction, and this leads to areas of myocardial malperfusion. And due to myocardial malperfusion, there will be increased myocardial damage and increased myocardial ischemia. Next is myocellular edema. Now, due to inflammation caused by ischemia reperfusion injury, permeability of cell membranes are increased, and this causes intracellular fluid accumulation and myocellular edema, and this affects the normal function of the cells within the myocardium. Edema implicates in contractile dysfunction, decreased ventricular compliance and capillary plugging that inhibits reperfusion of coronary microcirculation. Now, if coronary microcirculation, the reperfusion of coronary microcirculation will not occur, then the ischemia will be more adverse, and due to that again myocellular injury will occur, and thus contractile dysfunction, the severity of myocardial contractile dysfunction will increase. And next is the damage to non-myocyte components. Now non-myocyte components include injury to the endothelium of the coronary circulation and the fibroblast of myocardium. Fibroblasts are the structural components. Now what if endothelium of the coronary circulation is injured? So there will be obstruction in the coronary circulation, especially in level of microcirculation, and thus again it will cause increased amount of ischemia. These are the main mechanism of myocardial injury. The last point is acute desensitization of beta-adrenergic receptor blocker. It occurs as a part of ischemia repercussion injury, and acute desensitization and dysregulation of beta-adrenergic receptors of myocardium causes low cardiac output syndrome after cardiac surgery, and as well as if the beta-adrenergic receptors, the sensitivity of beta-adrenergic receptors are reduced, what will happen? The inotropes that we use after cardiac surgery to improve the cardiac function, to support the cardiac function, the inotropes, those act on the beta receptors, their activity will be reduced, because the beta receptor is not the sensitivity of beta receptors is reduced, so the beta receptors will not respond to the inotropes. So after cardiac surgery, to counter the low cardiac output syndrome will be very much difficult. So it is also an important point. Now the last is the consequences of ischemia repercussion injury. That means what happens due to ischemia repercussion injury. At first what occurs is acute myocardial ischemic injury and rapid functional deficit. This is usually reversible with repercussion, with restoration of coronary circulation, and after that myocardial stanning and hibernation occurs. Myocardial stanning and hibernation, this phase is partially recoverable. These are partially reversible, and if at this stage proper measures are not taken, then the myocardial necrosis will set in, and as a result of myocardial necrosis and apoptosis, what will happen? There will be overall myocardial cell death. Now we cannot recover a dead cell, so there will be permanent dysfunction of myocardium. These are the consequences of myocardial injury during cardiac surgery. Now I hope this session was understandable, and I am able to give you a clear-cut concept of mechanism of injury of myocardium. In the next session we will start the topic myocardial protection. We will now all know how the myocardium is injured. Now we will discuss how we can prevent these consequences, how we can prevent these injurious consequences to myocardium and protect the myocardium during this period of ischemia and repercussion during cardiac surgery. This is all for the session. I hope you will like the session, and Please let me know what is your opinion. If you like it, please hit the like button and give your opinion in the comment section. So thank you, goodbye, and stay happy.